All right, let's get right into it. Today we're talking about one of the most fascinating and, honestly, provocative thinkers of the 19th century, a guy named John Ruskin. Now, he was an art critic, sure, but he was also a social reformer, a man who looked at the roaring engine of the Victorian age and had the guts to ask, hey, are we sure we're going in the right direction?
And that really brings us to the one question that drove his entire life. Think about that for a second. For Ruskin, this wasn't just some, philosophical thought experiment. He genuinely believed that art and architecture and how we make things, that it all held the key to fixing what he saw as a completely broken world. It was a pretty radical idea back then, and you know what? It's still a really powerful one today.
So, to really get Ruskin, you have to picture the world he was pushing back against. The Industrial Revolution was going full steam ahead. It was this time of massive, massive change, and pretty much everyone saw it as unstoppable progress. But Ruskin, well, he saw something else entirely. He saw a crisis brewing.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because you see the conflict right there. On one hand, the Victorian era was patting itself on the back for its factories, its efficiency, its whole march of progress. But Ruskin was looking past all the smoke and steam, and he saw the human cost. He saw workers becoming just another part of the machine, the soul of real craftsmanship getting stamped out, and a society that was basically trading its moral compass for cash.
And this quote? This was his answer. This gets right to the absolute heart of his philosophy. For Ruskin, a beautiful painting or a well-built building wasn't just, nice to look at. No, it was a moral statement. It was proof that the person who made it was connected to the world around them, that they were working with honesty, and that they actually had a moral center.
So the big question is, how did he plan to fight this crisis? Well, Ruskin started his crusade in the two worlds he knew best, art and architecture. He had this incredible idea that if you could just reform how and why we create things, you could actually start to heal society itself. His first huge work, Modern Painters, actually started out as a defense of the artist J.M.W. Turner, but it just grew into something so much bigger. Ruskin argued that artists like Turner were truly great because they weren't just copying what they saw. They were getting at a deep emotional truth about nature. And to do that, you needed to observe carefully, and, this is crucial, you had to have a sincere moral character. After that, he turned his focus to buildings. And in his book, The Stones of Venice, he wasn't just writing a travel guide. Oh no! He used the city's amazing Gothic architecture as a kind of weapon against his own time. He argued that all the little imperfections and the obvious creativity in those old stones were signs of happy, fulfilled workers, a total contrast to the soulless, identical stuff popping out of industrial factories.
And this slide just brilliantly illustrates his whole method. In the 7 Lamps of Architecture, he lays out these 7 moral principles for how we should build things. He wasn't talking about engineering, he was talking about character. So take sacrifice. That's about the dedication of real human effort for a greater purpose. Or truth, using materials for what they are, not, covering up cheap construction with a fancy front. And life, the idea that buildings should have the creative touch of a human hand, not the cold perfection of a machine. For Ruskin, every single arch, every column, told a story about the society that built it.
But he didn't stop with art. Ruskin started to realize that the problems he saw in paintings and buildings were really just symptoms of a much, much deeper disease. The real problem, he figured, was the economic system that was running everyone's lives.
And this is where he became a true radical. The essays that make up his book Unto This Last, they were so controversial when they first came out in a magazine that the publisher was literally forced to stop printing them. And why? Because he went right for the jugular, directly attacking the foundations of 19th century capitalism.
And here's the bombshell he dropped. He completely redefined what it means to be wealthy. He basically said a nation's riches are not in its banks or its factories. They're in the health, the happiness, and the moral character of its people. So in his mind, a country full of miserable but super productive workers was actually a very, very poor country.
This slide really sums up his whole vision for a new kind of economy. He was calling for a system that actually cared for its workers, one that valued community and cooperation over just cutthroat competition. He wanted to make sure all work was meaningful and dignified. He wanted to put the soul back into how we work.
So you might be wondering, was he just some forgotten Victorian idealist? Was this all just a nice idea? Far from it.
I mean, he faced a ton of ridicule in his own time. But his ideas, they took root. And they grew in ways that are still shaping our world right now.
Let's just trace that influence for a second. His ideas directly sparked the arts and crafts movement, which was all about bringing beauty and craftsmanship back into everyday life. Then, decades later, his book Unto This Last had this profound impact on Mahatma Gandhi, who saw it as a blueprint for a more just society. And today, when we talk about sustainable living or fair trade or ethical business, we are, whether we know it or not, echoing John Ruskin's concerns.
And that brings us to the most important thing to take away from all this. It's really easy to paint Ruskin as some guy who just wanted to turn back the clock, but that's not it at all. He wasn't against industry or technology. He was against a system that put profit over people, efficiency over humanity, and just stuff over life itself.
So as we're standing here at our own technological crossroads, with AI and automation changing everything, Ruskin's questions feel more urgent than ever, don't they? Is his fight for a progress with a conscience? Is that now our fight too?